Khalid, hello and welcome to Southside Stories. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Matt. Pleasure to be here this afternoon.
So tell us a little bit, we always start the sessions pretty much the same way, Khalid. Just maybe tell us a little bit about you, where you're based, your job title and your company. We're going to talk a lot more about your company in a second, but just the quick summary, the snapshot of that would be great.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I graduated as a chemical engineer many years ago, found myself in the Unilever grad program making washing powder up in the Northwest for several years. Then got the opportunity to work in corporate strategy down at Sainsbury's supermarkets. So I have an FMCG retail background. Curious about how the finance world worked, given my area that I worked in, which was capital investment at Sainsbury's, and did an MBA. Luckily enough, sponsored by Sainsbury's, and then decided to apply for some associate programs of some banks. I was lucky enough to get onto one of them, which was UBS in M&A. And that was my career in finance, to be honest with you. That's where it all started. And fast forward probably 17 years later, after that, it does seem nearly 2 decades, as seem to aged, but came to the point of, as we're going to discuss today, about DKK and how we came about putting this together.
Great. And just give us a quick little snapshot of just DKK, just so our viewers and listeners can just get a fix of what industry and what does DKK do?
Yeah, of course. Look, DKK is a fintech. And as you know, the UK has been a hotbed and very encouraging of fintechs to grow and innovate. Probably one of the most leading countries, I would say, in Europe, second behind probably Silicon Valley from that perspective. DKK solved the problem of providing emerging market countries, especially within Africa, with much needed US dollar liquidity, which they struggle with on a daily basis due to various central banking constraints. Having looked after these markets when I was a banker, we've had a pretty good understanding of the sort of exam question that needed to be solved, and hence formed DKK back in January 2020 to essentially solve that problem of providing dollar liquidity into a market to help the working capital of SMEs, MMEs, and non-banks, starting in Central West Africa and then progressing all across Central Africa to where we are today.
Uh, just before we get into some of the interesting detail there, because you work in some very interesting markets, because you had this great corporate career with all these amazing brands and in banking and retailing and supermarkets. What was the reasoning to start your own gig, if you like, at DKK?
Yeah, look, I always say when you are looking to venture and start your own, venture, it's a personal thing at the end of the day. And look, I was very lucky to work for some amazing organizations throughout my career: Unilever, Sainsbury's, UBS, Citi, Deutsche. I then left banking formally in 2016 and actually joined some fintechs to cut my teeth. Initially, it was a pretty weird experience. It felt like I was getting a nosebleed every day, smaller company, having to do everything yourself, not really much structure, change of direction every half hour, but understanding a new set of pressures, a new set of demands, a new set of challenges. And having built a significant amount of know-how over the last sort of 4 years working at other fintechs, myself and my now business partner who worked with me on these ventures, um, and they usually happen sort of a Christmas night out, the Chinese restaurant, too many rice wines have gone down, to give it a go ourselves and not have any regrets and see what happens. And I must say, it was quite daunting, having come from a very safe and traditional environment. Having that steady paycheck coming every month, knowing where you are, and then all of a sudden, no brand over your head, just you and a laptop, and to get people to trust you as an individual and trust the company that has zero track record of doing anything, to be honest with you. But I didn't want to live with any regrets. I was lucky enough to have a career where if it didn't work out, I could, get my CV, dust it down, and send it to recruiters and start all over again. Um, but I guess it was my sense of adventure that got the better of me. Um, and that's why I decided to take the leap and form the company 5 years ago.
Superb. And you talked a little bit about Africa and emerging nations.
Mm.
Can you tell us a little bit more about where you operate currently?
Yeah, we're lucky enough to operate in several markets: Senegal, Cameroon, Ivory Coast, Ghana, Nigeria. Soon to be looking at East Africa. So Kenya essentially is the main hub. So Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda, Rwanda. We have an office in Dubai as well, with the headquarter in London. We are also looking to do our sort of significant fundraise this year, and that would help us go up to North Africa and down through the traditional mining countries, through the southern of Africa. But that's where we operate today. We're operational in approximately 9 markets.
And you mentioned earlier one of the problems you're looking to solve is around liquidity.
Mhm.
Could you explain, especially really for a non-financial audience, but could you explain what some of the issues around liquidity is for companies operating in those markets?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We sometimes get carried away using a lot of banking jargon that the day-to-day individual doesn't really know what the hell you're talking about. So I think it's a very fair question. In simple terms, it's having enough dollars available in the system or in a country to facilitate a company to pay its liabilities, its invoices. So one of the examples is we work with the supermarkets in Senegal. They import a lot of goods all over the world. And I think everyone understands that the international currency is US dollars. And a lot of companies invoice in US dollars. Traditionally, what happens is that the supermarket will then, from the proceeds of sale, have a whole host of local currency sitting in its bank account. The supplier is not too interested in the local currency, they want their dollars. So they go along to their bank, and their bank says, actually, the central bank haven't given us enough dollars this week to satisfy your requirement. We can only give you 20% of what you're asking. You've got to wait, which then causes increased delays. As you can imagine, currency depreciation as well, because they're sitting on a currency that is relatively volatile and not consistent. And therefore, any margins they have earned over the period of transactions slowly get wilted away and eroded. And also the supplier to the various clients we have, their trust seems to wane because they're getting late payment, late settlement. Um, I think the excuse that, oh, it's emerging markets, it's Africa, is going to be starting to wear thin now. And hence the orders halve, the business sells less, and you get into that vicious cycle, right?
Yeah.
That is very difficult to break out of. So that essentially is the real life problem that we sitting here in the UK or Europe and the US never dream of having any of those issues at all. If we wanted to go down to our local bureau de change or bank and get dollars, we quite happily get them within the hour, to be honest with you. And I mean, Revolut, for example, right, in this geography. So yeah, it's a real practical problem that we came in to solve. And that's what DKK sort of built its brand on.
And then tell us a little bit then how you solve that problem.
So our business is about matching two counterparties, A and B. Um, in order to have the dollars, we need a counterparty that requires the local currency. There's no point trading with someone for a commodity where on the other side they don't require it, don't need it, because then that leaves us exposed in the middle. In simple terms, we're sort of middlemen within the financial services or foreign exchange space. So our providers of dollars are sort of the main large non-bank financial institutions. Some of them you may know: StoneX, Corpay, Marex, which is ex-EDF and MAN, Convera, which was ex-Western Union Business Solutions. that need that local currency in country from the proceeds of sale from our client, the supermarket, to satisfy their remittance business or their own clients at the end of the day. So they furnish us dollars that we get in the international market. So we're not bound by the local market, even though we have local banking and we have local entities, as in companies set up in all the countries. We too have the same problem if we go locally to the bank to ask for dollars. They don't have any. So one of the beauties we have is we have access to dollars in the international market, which is in far much more abundance than it is locally. And hence, that's why we satisfy both sides of the trade. One, to satisfy a company sat here in London that needs the local currency to satisfy its payroll client or its remittance business or its corporate. And we receive the dollars to then essentially allow the local entity to satisfy its invoices or liabilities they have.
Great, that's very clearly explained. So fascinated by the sort of journey. So you took this, I guess it's a bit of a gamble, isn't it? Going from these big companies, you wanted to start your own company. You saw an opportunity, you saw a problem to be solved. Tell us, because then it must have been, okay, what now? And waiting for that first kind of proof of concept, the first customer that proved the value. Tell us a little bit what that was, what that experience was, and what that felt like for you.
Yeah, look, we didn't do any business for 7 months when we first started. And it was also bang in the middle of COVID as well. It's
Perfect
sort of
timing, right?
perfect
Yeah,
storm. And
yeah.
a lot of people, friends and family, naturally due to their concern, start asking questions on, was this the right thing to do? Maybe you should go back to something that you know, etc. And I think one of the horrible feelings of an entrepreneur is doubt and self-doubt.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And I think one of the things that I realized in myself is how resilient I was as an individual.
mm-hmm,
And also generally being quite an optimistic person as well, contrary to my wife, who's completely the other way. Um, with that type of blend, we kept faith in our own abilities. We knew that there was a real problem there. We've seen it ourselves. They just didn't decide to use us because of our size. We're new. There's only two of us. So we took the trip once the COVID restrictions had been lifted to travel internationally to go down into Senegal, where we had a long-standing client from another organization we worked with, who was one of the major importers from Imperial Tobacco. And after much discussion and much persuasion, we convinced him to give us a $10,000 invoice to pay for Rizzlers into the country. And our bold statement was, look, we can settle you within 2 days max when it's taking you 5, 6 days. And we knew this because we used to work at the old organizations that's how we got to know him. And he said, look, okay, fine. I'll give it a go. I'm not really expecting anything. In fact, I've kind of written it off that you'll probably not deliver anything. And lo and behold, through our contacts and infrastructure network, we delivered. In fact, within a day, actually. The next day, we had his dollars. And at the same time, we were able to place the local currency out due to another counterpart you had. So he was quite surprised and intrigued. And he said, how much more of this business can we do? And we looked at him, there's only two of us. We're managing via an Excel. We don't have a CRM. We're Excel spreadsheet. I mean, goodness me, we need to start thinking about growing as a company. So the realization then came that the proof of concept worked, but we only ever thought about one transaction. We never thought about 10 or 20 or 50, what that would mean. And we would need operations staff and we'd need compliance and we would need traders. So it was a sort of elation, and also, oh no, we we're not equipped for this, right? So we went back, and then we started to recruit a couple of people to help as well. Um, the old age beg, steal, borrow as much as you can to start with, and slowly but surely the trade started to come in. And fast forward to where we are now, into our sixth year, which I honestly, I have to pinch myself that I'm actually here this long. I thought we were going to last 5 months when we first started. We did about $4 billion worth of flow. For a company of our size, is even me, I have to think, wow, that's quite big
Yeah,
from
it's a
our
big number.
perspective. And
Yeah.
with 50 over 50 plus active clients across several markets now, the brand we built, and I think the biggest learning I can take from this, and I go back to my own career when I started off in the factory. Up until that point, you only ever work with people of your own age group. Um, but going to the factory was a quite humbling experience, because I was on a Silver Spoon graduate program where my colleague, this was their life, right? This was their day to day bread and butter. If they don't make the plan, they don't get the bonus. They can't fund the fees for their children to school to get a better life. So that type of humility has always stayed with me. And I think having that humility, especially within emerging markets, and going there and actually sometimes saying, look, we can't do this, that honesty goes a long, long way. And right at the start, we were throwing trades that we knew we couldn't do, but that would just compromise our integrity. And that carried a long
Mhm.
way. And the great thing is that word of mouth spreads like wildfire.
Right.
I think helped by the pedigree of the know-how, because we went to world-class institutions, so we cut our teeth. So okay, these guys have been trained at the right place, they've got the right credentials, they have the right levels of integrity as well in terms of what they do. um, really has been the culture of our company all the way through, right from the top, with myself and Dominic, in the way we like to do things. We are not afraid of saying, look, this isn't for us. We can't do this for you. And they're looking at us quite strangely. What do you mean? It's a great trade. I mean, yeah, but I'm not going to be able to deliver it. I'll hold on to
Mhm.
your money and it'll be there for weeks, right? It's not fair. Um, but yeah, every day we're learning something new.
So it's essentially, I was going to ask you about the brand, but in terms, because obviously, of course, trust is a core part of what you need. People need to have in you, the trust, given the sums of money involved. But the importance of brand versus, it sounds like it was almost you built it client by client, earned their trust, and then it was word of mouth and referral. Is that how it's grown?
Yeah, look, again, as you can imagine, we didn't have much for a marketing budget. I think the first website I built on GoDaddy myself and self-taught, right, to get a presence out there. But it did go through client by client, and word of mouth, which was a blessing for us, because you can't do that so much in an Anglo-Saxon market, to be honest with you. Because there's a lot more structure, a lot more sort of processes. But once we started to get good income, then we invested. We have a brand now. Invested a lot in terms of LinkedIn, PR, thought leadership. Also giving to roundtables with the central banks in some of the countries that we work with in terms of our observations. So actually, not just be a trusted actor in the marketplace, but also a trusted advisor as well. And subsequently, a lot of people come to us still and say, look, there's a lending company that's come in. What do you think of them? And that's really nice that they ask our opinion, because they see us as, an entity that tries to do things the right way. Also, having, Lord Elliot on our board as well by association also helps. He gives his brand name to our company. The private office of Sheikh Rashid bin Al Maktoum in Dubai, again, their association with us gives that kind of, let's say, formal vetting. That, yeah, okay, you cut your teeth at the institutions; they're not easy to get into. You have people's reputation publicly that want to be associated with you, and the way that you do business as well. So it helps. Yeah, it helps.
Fantastic. And so you've had this great run, from that first client to 50 plus clients, You said, I think you said 5 billion has flowed
Four.
through.
I wish
Four,
it was five.
four.
It's four, yeah,
I'm
at
sure,
the
well,
moment.
five. Well, that leads me to the next question. I mean, where do you see the business in the next 3 to 5 years? What's your
Yeah,
ambition?
so look, we have fundamentally built infrastructure. And what we have done is we've blended traditional finance, which in the literature is abbreviated as TradFi, and decentralized finance, where there's been a lot about blockchain and digital currencies, etc. And we participate in digital currency via a method called stable coins. The name gives it away. They're stable and they're digital assets. And we went out of our way to go and apply for regulatory licensing in Dubai through the Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority, VARA, to be a licensed virtual asset service provider, or VAS, as a broker dealer. That then sort of ring fences that activity and takes it away from the current business we have here in London. What that means with that infrastructure is, for those that are familiar, whenever you move US dollars globally or cross border, they always have to touch US soil before they come back out again. And that's known as the dollar clearing cycle. But not all banks are blessed with a so called dollar nostro, where an American bank has lent its dollar account to a bank, especially when it comes to some of the more sort of less developed emerging markets that we're in. This consequently causes a lot of delay. So this is the second problem, not just the liquidity, but once you have the liquidity locally, it's super slow to move around. What we stumbled across, and I use the word carefully stumbled because by no means did we actually work this out, we found that using stablecoins, which there are two main ones, Circle and Tether, abbreviated as USDC and USDT, you can actually clear dollars within the same day. So you can take the cycle time from 5 days, the same day, which is a tremendous benefit. And Africa has adopted digital currency a bit like mobile phone technology because their fixed line infrastructure was so poor. So we've been able to build infrastructure that is actually agnostic to market. And the plan is to basically go up into North Africa and Egypt, which is the biggest market in North Africa, and then down through the mining territories, Angola, Zambia, down to South Africa. We are looking to do our fundraise this year, our Series A fundraise, which allows us then to expand into those markets and do Africa top to bottom with our business model. Currently, we're around about 20 in terms of headcount, trying to get up to about 44, 45 by probably this time next year, post fundraise. And also, then the quickest way is acquiring licenses rather than we've sat through painfully going through license applications. And even though we're okay at them, I don't really want to do any more of them, actually, to be honest with you. The valuation we're looking to achieve is around between 100 and 120 million dollars. We're looking to raise 20 million against that to reinvest back into the company. Ironically, one thing I haven't mentioned, and what you have when you mention fintech, is a Wizzy app or a very, all bells, whistles desktop. We don't have a front end. We built our infrastructure back to front. So we built our back office system first to make sure that we can reconcile, settle, do all the confirmations. So one of the investment projects for this year is distribution of our product through an app or through a desktop to get better reach going forwards as well. So yeah, and then the plan eventually. People always ask me, so what is the exit strategy? Because that's always a natural question to ask. Ideally, we are probably being, and again, subconsciously built to be picked up by either a digital exchange that wants to bolt on the infrastructure we've built to their infrastructure they have, or a large regional bank that has not been able to invest the
Mm.
time or effort or build the plumbing accordingly, um, to basically bolt onto their desk or their business operations. And I think that's the way that when we've been talking to various advisors, that they seem the natural, logical progression for us.
As you get into, that's a really exciting plan. As you get into your Series A rounds, what's the experience been like? Because 3-4 years ago there was a lot of capital around, and now perhaps less so. But what's your experience been like there in terms of raising a Series A?
Um, I think the capital is still there. It's where it's being focused towards. I think you're absolutely right. About 5-6 years ago, the focus was on cross-border payment companies. A lot of the old RegTech, sort of the regulatory technology companies that we do the facial recognition, all that was pretty
Mm-hmm.
hot. I think we're now coming into an era of digital assets and digital technology and blockchain and distributed decentralization. The whole Web3, and as technology has evolved, that has now become the most fashionable thing to get excited about. We actually have a real life use case in what we do and the way we move value by straddling both traditional finance and the decentralized finance world. And that's probably one of the most attractive things in our model. So, interest in investment for us, luckily, touch wood, being not a payments company, but someone that manages liquidity has been helpful for us. I think in our conversations that we've had, and it's been a learning for me as well, money is one thing, but having know-how is far, far much, beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important for us to be able to work with a partner that actually can open doors for us, and open corridors for us. For example, we're incredibly Africa centric. Any potential investor that has an Asia um, bias would be incredibly beneficial. Or the States, you cannot ignore the States, right? Given what's happening now and the new administration being a lot more, let's say, friendly towards digital assets from the previous
Mm-hmm.
administration,
Mm-hmm.
now that becomes a viable option, intertwining our business model and accessing new markets and new clients from that perspective. So I think the money's still there. I think you've got to work a little bit more harder for it now than you
Mm-hmm.
had to probably
Mm-hmm.
previously. I think there's a lot of situations as well publicized that they haven't got the return back. But in our area, at least, yeah, we've probably got another, I would say, 18 to 24 months before the next hot item comes along. I think medtech is the next one down the corridor that people are getting excited about. And once they solve the regulation problem around medical history and records, then yeah, I think that would be the next area of focus for investment. But for now, we're okay.
Good stuff. Okay, let's go back and talk a little bit about the journey, because you 5 years in, you had a baptism of fire with COVID and the 7 months gap, and now you've built this really successful momentum. What are the learnings that you've made in that time, Khalid? Perhaps reflecting on both you as an individual, how do you think you've grown, and what are some of the key learnings you've made as an entrepreneur growing the business?
I think there are probably three themes that constantly pop up in my life on a daily basis. The first one is you can't worry about everything all the time. And look, I'm a big cricket fan. You play the ball that's in front of you, right? You can't guess what the bowler's going to do in the next over, the next over after that. So it's about the here and the now. So I don't worry about necessarily things that are happening 2, 3, 4 weeks down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
you only have a set amount of energy as an
Uh-huh.
entrepreneur. So you need to be very ruthless with your time and your energy in the way you spend it. And I think I've got a lot better in being a lot more ruthless with my time and my energy in terms of How will it benefit the company? How will it benefit me? Will I learn? Will I pick up new skills, etc.?
How do you
And I think
judge that?
that's
By the way, that's a really
sorry.
interesting. That's a very interesting point because a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with time and prioritization. When you, how do you? What's the gate for you? So how do you decide what really is important?
Well, some of it's been bitter experience because I've had a lot of my time wasted as an
Yeah,
entrepreneur
yeah,
right at the start. So you begin to work out um, through the first 2 minutes of a conversation whether something's
okay. Yeah,
viable or not. I think from a technical perspective, qualifying the conversation initially, very, very
yeah,
quickly,
yeah,
whether there's an opportunity there or not, has helped tremendously. But I think finally, it's about is it sitting in the right area for us in terms of activity, in terms of what we're doing? Simple things, if you've not even gone to our website, then
yeah,
clearly it's a speculative call, right?
yeah.
There's some real sort of basics, but Matt, trust me, I've been sat there in hotel lobbies for hours on end going through a meeting and nothing's resulted.
Uh
And
huh.
I naively thought something would. And then you begin to realize actually it was an intel gathering exercise for
Right.
the other party
Yeah.
rather than any sort of business to be done.
Yeah.
And yeah, sorry. And in terms of the third thing,
Uh huh. Yeah.
um, I I wish I didn't, but I regularly have 10 choices to make. I can only pick two or three. But the problem is those two or three change every day. And the 10 things don't really change. So the sort of analogy of spinning plates comes to mind. But sometimes there are no plates, right? Because you've only got three to spin at any point in time. So yeah, I think that has been a big learning in myself. I've always had this kind of characteristic or this curiosity to do things myself, and that has always remained, even when I was working back in the day in industry in the banks. But yeah, those would be the three things, the biggest things, lessons that I have learned. And I think also not to judge too quickly, finally, right? Just because something doesn't work out first time doesn't mean they may not appear in a different form later on. So not to burn bridges.
I mean, you need to be very resilient, don't you? Especially when times are tough, and that 7 months gap at the start must have been a bit of a test there. I think you may have already answered this, which is, how do you stay resilient? How do you stay optimistic? Is it just you are naturally that person, as you said, or maybe you're not that kind of personality? What would be a couple of tips there for keeping resilient and keeping going when it is tough?
Yeah, look, this is something that I'm super conscious of, and the way that so I a couple of years ago mentored for the House of St Barnabas to help people that have been displaced, homeless, get back into work. And the reason I wanted to do that is I've always wanted to give something back in terms of helping, advice, etc. But also having the empathy that society isn't just financial services, right? We live in a very privileged industry where the quantums are different, the remuneration is different, the stresses are different, even though they're relatively misplaced from time to time. As my younger sister tells me, she's a consultant anaesthetist who works in a hospital, and having to communicate bad news when things haven't gone well, there's unfortunately a bereavement. So I always look externally outside of the world that I work in,
Mm,
and there are a lot more. You'll find there are a whole arm's length of people that are having a much harder time than you,
mm,
but they still have a smile on their face. They
mm,
still get up every morning and they make the best of each day. And, the nurses, the teachers, the care workers, the people that come and collect your refuse, those for me are inspiring because you know that they are set on a certain pay scale, yet, and they know that they have certain pressures, but yet they still go deliver. So yeah, I mean, that for me is always a good reminder that, sometimes we can be a little bit sport brattish in our industry. I take that. We have a different type of behavior and stuff, but that's something that's always kept me grounded, to be honest
Love
with you.
that.
And
Love that. Yeah. Great example. Great example. Really good. Think externally, think about other people, empathy. Love that. Let's switch to team and hiring. I'm fascinated because you work in these very diverse markets, Dubai, London HQ, and then the African countries, culturally very diverse.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit about both you, how you adapt working in different cultures, but also the team around you. How important is it they are tuned, and how do they get that empathy with the local market?
Yeah, I think you're right. We do work across several geographies, several societal and cultural norms. But I've always said that values are agnostic of culture, right? So whatever the values of the company are in terms of the integrity, treating people with respect, trying to do business the right way, yes, it could be delivered differently due to the cultural and societal norms that you might have versus a Ghana versus a Dubai, but the fundamental value set doesn't change, and that's very, very core to DKK. Um, Again, when you start a business, all you ever know is fellow bankers, and you think they're the right people to come and hire. And some have worked and some haven't. So we've gone quite laterally to give people opportunities where we can train you and we can build up the skill set, which is a hit on us initially because you don't get the uptake straight away. But what you do get is an incredible sense of loyalty and gratitude in the fact that someone's taking the time to give an opportunity. And we always say you leave us better than you joined us in sort of our mantra. And yeah, look, I think sitting where I sit is a little bit easier, but when you've got Dubai colleagues interacting with colleagues in Africa, that's also a bit of a challenge as well when you get that sort of cross communication rather than it's easy for me where I sit, right? Because they'll listen to what I have to say. Sometimes I don't know why, but they do. Um, and then, but it's that managing that dynamic between the other colleagues and communication is super important to me. And every Tuesday for 45 minutes, we have let's say, a company Zoom call where we go through everything and everyone knows what everyone is doing. But it's also like any highly performing team, a bit of a dressing room type environment and pushing each other to deliver for the good of the company. It's a very safe and open forum. People can say, look, compliance, you're taking way too long. You're not applying any common sense, right? Um, but it gives the freedom for people to express themselves in their own cultural nuance and getting people to understand. Like we have some colleagues from Eastern Europe that work in compliance that initially really struggled with the African colleagues just because of the way they communicate. Not that they're very, very nice people, but when they write an email, if you don't understand the person, you feel like you're getting a summons for court kind of thing, right? So it's managing those, and I think that will be the biggest challenge of us going forwards is managing that sort of global comms with individuals that say haven't worked at a City or a Deutsche or a Shell or a truly global organization that you get indoctrinated from day dot the day you join, and all they've known is their own area. I would say is a constant challenge. But look, as I said, values are agnostic. So we have to be conscious and work extra hard to aid communication across the company, but also for example, it's Ramadan at the
Mm,
moment,
mm,
right? The colleagues in Dubai can leave at 3:30. That's just a countrywide directive. So when it first happened and colleagues in compliance couldn't understand, like, why aren't they at their desk? I went, because they're fasting. They're not
mm,
there, right? Happens with some of the countries in Africa as well. So
mm.
education, and creating cultural awareness is key for us.
When you look at hiring uh, and talent, many entrepreneurs talk about how hard hiring is. And it sounds like you've found a solution in one respect, in that you look broader than just a banking background. You're looking for a different type of maybe skill set or potential, perhaps. What are some of the unshakable attributes, though, that you look for when you're hiring and expanding? You're going to go from 20 to 44, so you're going to double the team in the next couple of years. What are some of the key non-negotiables when you're interviewing somebody?
Easiest to answer that is to outsource it to someone who knows what they're doing. No, I'm joking. No, look, I think for me, I'm a great believer that skills can be taught, but attitude can't. Right at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
you've got to come in and have a can-do attitude. You have to have the willingness and the curiosity and the hunger to learn. I have no issue with someone that asks 150 questions because they want to learn and be better, rather than someone coming in with a sense of, let's say entitlement or status that they may have had in another environment. I think also non-negotiable is disrespect towards colleagues. That is totally unacceptable. You can air your differences in a professional way without being derogatory. At the end of the day, that for me is it's an instant red flag. But I think the last one for me is they understand why they want to go on this journey. It's all very well me selling the company, but they know why they want to be here and what excites them to being part of that journey. You know, I always say when I speak to my fellow colleagues, the type of people you have between 0 to 1 is not the same type you have between 1 to 10 in the skill set. Granted, some of the people from 1 to 10 stay and they end up joining you on the 1 to 10, and some drop off. So it's also understanding and that's why you have to go into the market and pay for that skill going forwards. But even though I like to have this romantic notion that we can go and upskill people there's going to be a time where I need semi-skilled at least to come in. And then it becomes more the behavioral aspect in terms of where they are in their career, what are their motivations, what do they want to achieve going forwards. But yeah, it's something that surprises me every day, to be honest with you. Some days you think you have it cracked, and then you're back to square one again, right? Where you think, okay, fine, that didn't work out so well. But look, we allow room for failure as well. It's important. It helps you grow. But that would be sort of my sort of penny's worth in terms of my sort of recruiting and going forwards.
Great. Super. And Khalid, last question. That's around learning, I guess, still, which is when you think about your own development, becoming an entrepreneur, tell us about a leader or somebody in your life who's had a really positive impact on you in your professional life. Sometimes this is an early leader, sometimes it's a mentor, it could be a member of the family.
Yeah, look, I was lucky enough it's going back to Unilever. And I would say one of the leaders I still remember was my old shift leader, Alan Britton. That was part of the infrastructure of the factory, been there 30 years, man and boy, worked his way all the way up. And I think the thing I learned working with Alan is a degree of respect for others and humility. But leading means that you lead by example from the front. And it's much easier to do in a live manufacturing environment, getting stuck in, but also the ability to help manage meaning of situations to your colleagues when they're not sure what to do, and communicating in an incredibly simple and eloquent way to get your message across. I did a very technical degree. So when I first started communicating in business, it was coming out like algorithms, right? I wasn't being able to get my message across properly, and it was just too complicated, right? Watching someone like Alan who didn't really have any formal educational background, but worked his way through a factory environment and seen it grow, leading, a team of 180 people. He was the head shift leader. And watching him in action always reminds me the power of simplifying the
Yeah.
message to people, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, there is a real art in simplicity. Um, and if I always say to people, look, if you cannot explain it to me, it's either way too complicated or you don't understand it yourself properly, right? From that perspective. So, yeah, in those formative years, a 22-year-old straight from central London, thrown up into a Warrington factory, different accents, different culture,
Yeah.
different background, people that are old enough to be your dad, you're working with side by side. Yeah, Alan would be someone that always comes to mind.
Great. Well, here's to Alan, eh? And
Absolutely, yeah.
simplification. Yeah.
Yes.
Khalid, thank you so much. It's been fascinating talking to you. Great momentum in the business, and wishing you every success as you build towards your next billion, and expanding that team up to 44. It's going to be, I'm sure, a great journey. So good luck with that.
No, thank you, man. Look, thank you for giving the opportunity to listen to our story and my story of where I've got to today. And hope you get to meet sometime in the future as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Khalid.
Thank you.